I still remember the cold sting on my skin when the phone buzzed in my hand that stormy Saturday night. The text came from an unknown number. No name, no photo. Just one line. Thank Gabriel's Church, 3 p.m., you need to see this. I sat motionless in my old Subaru, parked by the curb, the wipers working furiously but failing to clear the fog clinging to the windshield. Across the cobblestone street, groups of people in formal wear were slowly filing through the grand stone gates of the granite church. My name is Sophia Campbell, I'm 34 years old, and right now I have no idea what I'm doing here, except playing the part of a lunatic secretly following her husband. Zachary told me he had a 3-day legal conference in Philadelphia. His schedule said it. His assistant confirmed it. The plane tickets were booked last week. I even helped him pick out his tie. But now I'm in Maine, more than 300 miles from Philadelphia, staring at a church that, deep down, I know is about to destroy whatever's left of my heart. I took a deep breath, lowered my sunglasses, opened the door, and stepped into the street. Each step across the wet bricks felt like a sentence being hammered into my skull. The church bells began to toll, low, mournful chimes echoing like an unavoidable judgment. The wooden door creaked open. I slipped quietly into the last pew, hiding behind a thick stone column. No one noticed me. Why would they? Who would notice a woman in a dark coat lurking in the back during a wedding? My hand clenched the strap of my bag. My heartbeat stuttered as the organ began to play. And then he stepped up. Zach in a charcoal tuxedo I'd never seen before. His jaw tightened, that same nervous tick I knew by heart. But today, he wasn't standing before a jury. He was waiting for his bride. I had to brace myself against the pillar. My knees nearly gave out. My breath caught when the bride appeared, white dress sweeping across the aisle, red hair cascading over her shoulders. Jenna, my best friend since high school, the one who held my hand when my mother passed, the one who cried with me on my wedding day. And now she was walking toward my husband, wearing the soft smile I once believed belonged only to me. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to witness the sacred union. I couldn't make out what the priest was saying. Everything inside me went numb. The wedding, the lights, the music, the vows felt like a distorted copy of my own marriage. And the leading roles? My husband and my best friend. I don't remember how I left the church. Don't remember how long I drove. All I know is that when I pulled up in front of my apartment in Portland, I was still wearing my rain-soaked coat, and my hands were still trembling. Another message from the unknown number lit up my phone. Now you've seen it, so what will you do? I laughed. A dry, glass-shattering sound. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, Zach's favorite, the one he saved for special occasions, and swallowed it in one burning gulp, just to remind myself that at least my pain was still real. I was no longer the wife, waiting for her husband's late-night check-in. No longer the friend who believed loyalty could never be broken. I was Sophia Campbell, and I had just watched my husband marry my best friend. Under candlelight and hollow blessings. I set down the glass, opened my laptop, started a blank document. Dear Laura, they thought I would stay silent. They thought I would break. I didn't scream. Didn't smash anything. Didn't resort to knives or messy revenge. I only needed one thing, the truth. And the truth always finds a way to burn. When I opened my eyes the next morning, sunlight pierced through the curtains like mockery. A beautiful day, perfect for burying the past. I brewed a cup of coffee, but never touched it. My hands were still unsteady. My phone buzzed again, same number. Now you know. What will you do? I stared at the screen, then at my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to sit still. Zach had lied. Jenna had betrayed. But what I couldn't forgive was realizing I had been used like a pawn. And I've never been the type to stay silent when pushed off the board. I opened my laptop. The first line of the email to Laura, my mother-in-law, was still there. Dear Laura, I hope this email finds you well. Polite. Hollow. Just like the way she smiled at me during galas and then whispered behind my back, calling me a nameless accessory with convenient political ties. I deleted the email. Instead, I opened a hidden file. Linked accounts. Something Zach never imagined I'd find. 3 years ago, I helped him recover access to an internal email at his law firm. I remembered everything. Domains, backup logins, even his lazy habits. Password, Sophia1121. My birthday. Funny and pathetic. One click, and I was inside his secondary account. Work emails, browser history, cloud files. And immediately I realized I wasn't just betrayed, I had been weaponized. There were folders labeled Legacy Holdings, a Florida-based real estate investment firm. Inside were dozens of emails between Zach and a woman named Clarissa Dalton, a lawyer specializing in private trust structuring. Clarissa had attended a charity gala hosted by, of course, Laura. I downloaded everything. 2 hours later, I was drowning in a web of financial schemes more complex than I could have imagined. Over a dozen hidden accounts, filed under various shell entities, but they all traced back to one name: Zachary Campbell. Or worse, the Zachary and Jenna Trust. They had planned this for a long time. One PDF file was titled Plan Transfer Jenna Primary with a note. Trigger after Sophia is no longer legally bound. I didn't know if that meant divorce or something darker, but in that moment every piece fell into place. Zach hadn't married Jenna for love. He needed her to maintain legal control over assets structured under my mother's name, who once served as a federal financial commissioner. I was the political key that legitimized everything. A deeper cloud search revealed documents for various property projects, and my name had been scrubbed from legal structures 7 months ago, right when Zach started traveling more. One email from Jenna to Laura read, Turner Fund deal finalized. Sophia still doesn't suspect a thing. Zach handled it well. Laura replied, Good. Keep her distracted with the charity galas. If anything urgent comes up, I'll have Joe step in. Joe, Laura's trusted assistant, the one who used to bow politely to me every Thanksgiving. Now I knew he was just another link in the chain of control. Another part of the legal accessory meant to legitimize their dirty financial dealings. I got up from my chair and stepped out onto the balcony, letting the cold wind slap my face. I hadn't just been betrayed in marriage. I had been the perfect cover for a years-long financial scheme, orchestrated by the very woman I once called mother-in-law. And now that the truth was laid bare, I knew I couldn't call a lawyer. Not yet. I couldn't go to the press. If I wanted to flip the board, every move had to be calculated. They had to think I was still in the dark. Still trusting. I went back to my desk and opened a private browser window. I typed, How to create a counter-trust personal asset protection. Then, legal grounds to void a prenuptial agreement in the state of Maine. I didn't know how long it would take, but I had one thing they never saw coming. I had loved them for real. And now I had nothing left to lose. I tilted my head back and finished the last of my cold coffee. The bitter taste scratched down my throat like a dare. All right, Zach. If you want to play chess, I'll be the move you never saw coming. Zach came home 3 days after the legal conference in Philadelphia, a city he never actually stepped foot in during the entire trip. I heard his car pulling up from down the block. I stayed seated calmly at the dining table, flipping through a stack of thick documents. Evidence, contracts, bank statements. Pieces of the betrayal I had spent nearly 40 hours putting together. Every last detail. The door opened. Hey, babe? His voice sounded casual, like nothing had happened. I didn't answer. I poured a glass of water and set it next to the file I had prepared for him. Zach walked into the kitchen, slipping off his coat, holding a takeout bag from our usual Japanese spot. I brought sushi, he said, setting it down. It's been a while since we've had dinner together. I looked up, straight into his eyes. Since when? I asked. He paused. What do you mean? Since when did you start lying to me? My voice was low, calm, dangerously calm. He laughed, but it was forced. Sophia, what's going on? I just got back. I know everything, Zach. I pushed the file toward him. About Jenna, about Clarissa Dalton, about Laura, and about the West Palm Beach properties listed under the Jenna and Zachary Trust. His lips pressed into a thin line. His eyes shifted slightly to the right. A tell he always gave when he was lying. "You've been spying on me?" I smirked. "You say that like I had to. You were getting married in another state while texting me about some legal conference." His expression changed. Confusion flickered across his face before morphing into the fake composure I'd seen him use in courtrooms. "It's more complicated than you think." "You're right, much more complicated than I thought." I stood and walked over to the filing cabinet. "Like how you used my connection to Senator Raymond Carter, my uncle, to shield Laura's shady financial operations for the past 2 years?" He started to speak, but I raised a hand. "I'm not talking to my husband, Zach. I'm talking to the stranger who built an entire stage of lies and cast me as the oblivious extra. And I finally decided I'm done playing along." I pulled out a large envelope and placed it on the table. "Remember last year when I had that accident, and you suggested putting the property in both our names? Said it would make paperwork easier?" He nodded cautiously. "Well, I had my personal attorney add a little something to that contract." I opened the envelope and pulled out a notarized power of attorney, along with a severability clause in our prenuptial agreement, legally separating all ownership rights in the event of fraud. "This, Zach, has been in effect for 11 months, and as of today, you no longer have any legal right to stay in this house." Zach froze, for the first time unable to come up with a response. He stared at the paper like it was an eviction notice from a world he thought he controlled. "You can't do this." "I just did." I picked up my phone and dialed. "Michael's on his way. He's my legal representative. If you're still here when he arrives, you won't just lose the house, you could lose access to any remaining assets." Zach took a deep breath. "We can talk, like adults. There's no need to involve lawyers." I laughed. "This time, a genuine one. You staged a fake marriage, embezzled money, and conned both my family and your own mother out of millions through shady trust funds, and now you want to talk like adults?" He stayed silent, standing there with the takeout bag neither of us planned to open. I walked to the door. "I won't lower myself again, Zach. If you ever truly knew me, then you know this. Once I stand up, I don't look back." Zach bit his lip and looked at me. "Sophia." And he did, without a word of protest, because he knew the game had changed. I was no longer the quiet wife waiting at the door with a warm meal. I was the one who had pulled down the curtain on their grand illusion. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I chose a small cafe by the Presumpscot River, the one where Jenna and I once spent 8 hours debating whether my wedding dress should be ivory or pure white. Back then, I believed friendship could survive anything, even bridal cake arguments. Now I know, some things only look like friendship, but are really just the perfect disguise for a blade. Jenna arrived on time, still had the same sunlit copper waves, still wore the brown leather jacket I gave her on her 30th birthday. But her eyes, they were no longer effortless. She sat down across from me. No greeting. Just stared at the latte the barista had just set down. "What do you want, Sophia?" I pulled a stack of documents from my bag and set them on the table between us. "What do you think you know about Zach?" Jenna swallowed hard. "I know he loves me." I tilted my head. "Love? Then I'm sure you won't mind looking at these emails." I flipped the first page, screenshots of a conversation between Zach and Laura, my mother-in-law, planning to transfer real estate ownership from me to Jenna through marriage. Next was a bank statement from Jenna's newly co-owned company, Silverwood Realty, receiving a $950,000 0-cents wire transfer from Laura's account. Reason: preferred share buyout. Jenna flipped quickly through a few pages. Her face went pale. What is this?" "Proof that you weren't just the mistress, you were a tool, and your mother's company, Lucille's, was quietly acquired by Laura, 12% over the past year through multiple legal fronts." "That's not possible," Jenna murmured. "My mother would never sell outside the family." "You signed the papers, Jenna." I pulled out another copy. "When you were a junior legal intern, You legally validated the transfer of a Kennebunkport property, without knowing it was the first move in Laura's acquisition strategy. Jenna's eyes widened. Her hands shook as she reached the page with her own signature. Zach said, "It was a procedural exercise, just part of my training file." Her voice trailed off. "I didn't need to be cruel. Sometimes, the truth is punishment enough." "And now," I said slowly, "you have two choices." She looked up, panic flooding her eyes. "Either keep pretending Zach loves you, that you were the chosen one, or accept the truth we were both pawns in a con that's been years in the making, and work with me to end it." Jenna sat in silence for a long time. The wind tilted her latte slightly. A single maple blossom drifted down, landing between our stacks of papers, like the final pause before a new song begins. "I didn't know my mother was being manipulated," she whispered. "Not at all. I believe you." I looked her straight in the eye. "That's why I'm sitting here. What are you planning to do?" I pulled out a small USB and placed it on the table. "Everything's on here. Assets, recordings, trust fund details, even emails between Zach and Clarissa. The lawyer helping Laura launder money through those trusts." Jenna stared at it like it was a lit match resting on hardwood. "If this gets out, everything falls apart," she said softly. "My mother's company, my family's name. And you think I haven't wrestled with that?" I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "Zach lived with me for 8 years. Jenna, I trusted you when I handed you my wedding bouquet. I trusted him when I signed our marriage license. Now I choose to end the game, even if it burns me with it." Another silence followed. This time, no wind, no clinking mugs, just Jenna, eyes red, and a hand slowly reaching across the table to pick up the USB. "I'll help you." I nodded. "But only because I need to know," she said, her tone steel-edged. "If you ever really saw me as a friend, or if I was just another piece in your counterattack." I looked at her. "For a long time. I'm not rewriting our friendship, Jenna. But I won't let anyone use it to cover up crimes anymore." She gripped the USB tighter, determination flashed in her eyes. "Then let's begin," Jenna said. I exhaled. I wasn't alone anymore. 3 days after meeting Jenna, I sat inside the office of Eli Mercer, a financial attorney specializing in trust investigations and money laundering. He was a longtime friend of my brother Noah, and the only person Noah trusted enough to hand me off to in this situation. Eli's office was simple but organized. Sunlight poured in through the windows, highlighting piles of case files, a whiteboard covered in symbols, and a large web of connections that Jenna and I had finished mapping out just that morning. Jenna sat beside me. No more leather jacket, just a pale blue blouse, hair tied high. For the first time in years, I saw someone no longer clouded by romantic delusion, but a woman ready to act. Eli took a sip of coffee and opened his laptop. "Are you both sure you want to go this deep?" he asked, eyes still on the screen. I nodded. "We're not here to suggest. We're here to end this." He tapped a few keys. A complex financial flowchart appeared on screen. "What you uncovered is just the surface. This system," he circled a red section, "starts with a nonprofit called Everhope Education Fund, founded 18 years ago by none other than Laura Campbell." Jenna's eyes widened. "That's the scholarship fund for children affected by medical crises. My mom's been a donor for nearly a decade." "And that's how they earned public trust?" Eli nodded, flipping open a spreadsheet. "But according to bank records, most of the donations from corporate partners weren't used for scholarships. They were funneled into secondary trusts, most under the names of minors." I frowned. "You mean they used kids' names to hide money?" "Exactly. And the legal custodians on those trusts? Almost all are either directly tied to Laura or Zachary." Jenna turned toward me, her face hardening. "He told me he was helping with a child finance initiative in Vermont. I even attended the conference with him." Eli slid another folder across the desk. There was no conference. It was a fake front, created to legitimize the transfer of funds from real estate firms into this system. I picked up the last bank statement. My chest tightened as I read, "Beneficiary, Elias Porter Jr., age 6. Custodian, Clarissa Dalton. Elias, the son of a front desk clerk at a homeless outreach center in Augusta. I had given him a new backpack last fall before school started. No one at the center knew. His name had been used as a tool for laundering money. How many children? I asked, my voice tight. Eli answered without hesitation. Over 30, and more than half of them never received any of the scholarship or insurance benefits that were publicly promised. Jenna clenched her fists. And my mother. Did she know? Eli was silent for a moment. Then he opened a decrypted email, an exchange between Laura and Jenna's mother, Lucille Dawson. Just have Jenna sign it. She'll legitimize everything if it's ever audited later. As for the Everhope Fund, I guarantee public benefit remains the best cover. I didn't know what Jenna was thinking, but her shoulders dropped as if someone had just placed 1,000 pounds on her back. Not just betrayal by a lover, but being exploited by her own mother. I placed my hand on the table. Eli, what do we need to do to bring this to light without harming the kids? Or making innocent people pay the price? He nodded and opened a new file. We'll need to isolate the legitimate funds, classify all involved parties by their level of involvement, and work directly with a financial prosecutor to submit the full case. But, he paused, his expression serious. You need to know, once this is submitted, it will explode. Press coverage, federal investigation, organizational shutdowns, asset freezes, even immediate arrests. I exhaled slowly. We're not here to start a wildfire, we're here to rescue the kids who are already burning without even knowing it. Jenna nodded beside me. And if this ends my career, so be it. But it ends. Eli looked at us both for a long time. Then I'll help you write the ending to this story, but we have to write it right. That morning, Portland was blanketed in a pale fog. My apartment was flooded with cold white light, and the dining table had become a battlefield covered in documents, financial maps, trust diagrams, and legal reports Eli had sent over the night before. I hadn't slept at all. Jenna had passed out on the couch, still clutching the list of children whose names had been exploited to launder money. Couldn't close my eyes, because I knew if I did, I'd see their faces. And the panic of adults watching them lose everything because of someone else's crimes. The doorbell rang at 8:12 a.m. I opened the door, and there she was, Laura Campbell, like a cold wind from the past stepping inside. She wore a black high-collared coat, her hair neatly pinned up, sunglasses hiding her eyes. But her voice was unmistakable. We need to talk, Sophia, just the two of us. I blocked the doorway. You should speak to my attorney. Attorneys will do what attorneys do. I'm here to do what smart women do, negotiate. I let her in. Jenna jolted awake at the sight of her, but I signaled her to step into the bedroom. Laura sat down, removed her glasses, and looked at me with a calmness that sent chills down my spine. You think you've got it all in your hands, and yes, you have a lot. But what you don't have, Sophia, is the full picture. I crossed my arms. I have enough to send all of it to the federal prosecutor. She nodded, unsurprised. I know. And if you do that, everything collapses. Not just me, not just Zach, but the children depending on this system, even if that system was built from rotting bricks. I let out a cold laugh. That's quite the confession. Laura tilted her head. Do you know how many leukemia treatments the Everhope Fund has paid for in Appalachia? How many single mothers got vocational scholarships through the Jenna Foundation, the fund I created to cover up the dealings between Jenna and Zach? I clenched my hands. You're trying to repaint evil as necessary? I'm showing you that some evils are necessary. I said nothing. In my mind, I saw little Elias, 6 years old, beaming with his new backpack. If the fund collapsed, would he still get treatment? You could expose everything, Laura continued, her voice lower now, but you'd be destroying the future of dozens of innocent lives. Do you really think the media will distinguish between masterminds and children whose names were used? I asked. So, what is it you want? Laura opened her bag and placed a large envelope on the table. A quiet settlement. I withdraw from Everhope. Jenna's name gets cleared from any suspicious trusts. You receive a secure financial package, to rebuild. Everything gets restructured. Legal, mutually beneficial. No one goes to prison. No child loses their scholarship. I stared at the envelope. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. Money, legal assurances, beautifully worded promises written by Boston's slickest attorneys. I said nothing, and that's when she delivered her final blow. Sophia, think of Elias, of Caleb, of Zoe, the girl with cerebral palsy in Bangor you took photos with last year. If this system collapses, those children will be the first to suffer, not me, not Zach. I turned away. My hands trembled. My heart felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. If I exposed everything, my conscience might be lighter. But who would bear the cost? I stepped out onto the balcony. The fog had lifted, sunlight spilled across the rooftops. In that moment, I wasn't Sophia, the betrayed woman, the used one. I was Sophia, the person holding the fate of dozens of innocent lives with a single click. Jenna stepped out behind me, gently taking my hand. "What will you do?" she asked. And I didn't answer right away. We stood there in silence. At our feet. A crossroads. Justice. And the price of it. Finally, I turned to Laura. "You'll have your answer. But not today. Today, I need to speak to the people this will affect, before I decide whether to destroy what's left, or try to save it." Laura nodded. She understood. Or pretended to. But I knew. The hardest choice isn't revenge. It's deciding who deserves to be saved, and who must pay. That evening, the Campbell Lakefront estate glittered like a winter palace. Crystal chandeliers, elegant hors d'oeuvres, expensive champagne, and hundreds of guests in perfectly tailored formal wear. The invitation read, "Celebrating 20 years of the Everhope Foundation and Laura Campbell's 60th birthday." I walked in wearing a plain black gown, no jewelry, no lipstick. Only a cream-colored envelope tucked neatly inside my coat lining, the copy of Laura's quiet settlement proposal. The original was already secured by my attorney. Another copy had been delivered to the FBI 3 days ago. Jenna walked beside me, silent and cold as a shadow. She wore a gray velvet dress, her eyes locked on her mother. Lucille Dawson, beaming beside Laura at the far end of the room. Eli, my attorney, stood near the main entrance, posing as event tech support. And Noah, my brother, was parked outside in the surveillance van, monitoring the feed with our investigation team. Everything was in place. Zach spotted me first. He walked toward me, stiff smile in place, champagne flute in hand. "Sophia, you actually came?" I smiled but didn't touch him. "An event this important? How could I miss it?" His eyes flicked nervously between me and Jenna. His expression said it all. He could feel the pieces slipping from his grasp. Laura's voice rang out through the microphone. "Let's all raise a glass to 20 years of Everhope, a symbol of generosity, equity, and compassion." I stepped forward. "If I may, I'd like to say a few words." All eyes turned to me. Laura squinted slightly but kept her smile intact. Zach froze. Jenna quietly moved back toward Lucille. I turned to face the entire room. The warm light from the chandeliers lit up the faces of every guest. Politicians, business leaders, people who had once shaken Laura's hand in the name of community service. "My name is Sophia Campbell," I began, my voice steady, "and I was once the daughter-in-law of this woman." A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. Laura didn't react. Yet, I used to believe in the Everhope Foundation. I believed it existed for the children. But over the past few months I've discovered that behind its noble mission lies a sophisticated network of money laundering, asset manipulation, and the exploitation of children's names to legitimize massive profits for the Campbell family and its associates. The whispers grew louder. Zach stepped up, hissing under his breath, "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't look at him. I simply pulled a cream-colored envelope from my coat and held it up. "This is the quiet agreement Laura Campbell personally brought to my home. A clever proposal. Stay silent, keep the system running, and in return the children wouldn't lose their scholarships, their medicine." I paused for a beat. But I'm not someone who trades truth for temporary safety. I slowly pulled a matchbox from my purse. Struck a match. The room held its breath. You said I had a choice, and this is mine. I touched the flame to the envelope. It caught fire, burning brightly in the elegant atmosphere of the event. The scent of scorched paper drifted through a room scented with candle wax and Chanel perfume. The murmurs erupted into shouts. Some guests pulled out their phones. Laura stood still. But the smile vanished from her face. Her eyes locked on mine, trying to see if I had truly destroyed everything. I turned to her, calm. Don't worry, that was just a copy. I raised my hand to signal Eli, and at that moment, federal investigators entered from both the front and rear doors. Some guests dropped their glasses. Others screamed. 2 agents moved straight toward Laura and Zach. Laura Campbell? Zachary Campbell. You are under investigation for money laundering, federal financial fraud, and the misuse of charitable entities. Zach's face went pale. Laura didn't move, but her lips were pressed so tightly they had gone white. As they cuffed her, she looked back at me. Not with hatred, but with a haunting regret. You just burned down everything we built. I looked at her one last time. No, I just saved the children from growing up in a lie. News of William Campbell's concealed death dominated headlines for an entire week. The state court officially announced it was reopening the investigation into the so-called hunting accident, and Clarissa Dalton's records, Laura's most trusted attorney, were frozen to trace back illicit financial transactions. The children whose names had been used to create laundering trusts were now legally protected through a court-issued order. I should have felt relieved, but a phone call from Eli that night knocked the air out of me. Sophia, he said gently, I think you should come down here. There's a file connected to your biological father. My father, Thomas Blake, died when I was 19. An investigative journalist, ethical, disciplined, the only man I ever placed complete faith in. He'd exposed political scandals in D.C., received threats but never backed down. And now, his name had surfaced in Laura Campbell's private asset records. Eli opened the file for me. Inside was a black and white photo, taken more than 30 years ago. Laura, young, with her arm around a man I recognized instantly, my father. The angle was grainy, but the smile, the eyes, unmistakable. At the time, Laura was 23, working as an assistant for a nonprofit media foundation. Thomas Blake was an independent investigative advisor for the same organization. Eli explained. They traveled together for 9 months. There were rumors that it was more than just work, but nothing was ever confirmed. I felt my heart climb into my throat. And? I asked, my voice cracking. Eli handed me a sealed envelope, a copy of a DNA test result, from a private hospital in New York. You'll want to read the last page. I opened it. Each line felt like a blade slicing through every old layer of trust I had left. Sample 1, Zachary Campbell. Sample 2, Sophia Blake Campbell. Biological relationship. Half siblings, same father. Probability of match? 99.7%. I went numb. The entire room spun. I gripped the edge of the chair, unable to believe what I had just read. Zachary Campbell, my ex-husband, was my half-brother. I had once married my brother. A woman in the corner burst into tears. Jenna. She had just found out too. Eli sighed. We believe William discovered the truth a few months before his death. There's an unsent letter in his safe. He wrote, I can't let Laura continue to live on this lie. If Zach finds out, he'll crumble. And Sophia will be shattered. I can't let that happen. I stood up and stepped out onto the balcony, cold wind slapping my face, though I couldn't feel a thing. I remembered all the nights Zach and I sat by the fireplace. Our first kiss, the way I used to trust him. Utterly and completely. As if he were the only person in the world meant to walk beside me. And now I understood why there was always a crack I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a buried truth that turned my life into a cruel, immoral experiment. That night I sat alone in the living room. Beside me was an old wooden box filled with letters my father had written to me in college. I chose one, opened it. My dearest daughter, if one day you find out that your father isn't as perfect as you thought, remember, adults make mistakes too. But not everyone gets the chance to make them right. I folded the letter, laid my hand on top of it, closed my eyes. It wasn't my fault. I repeated that to myself 100 times. But I couldn't pretend I didn't know. Tomorrow, I'd have to face Zach in court. He didn't know I had discovered the truth. And I didn't know what I would say. Some truths break us. Some truths force us to rise from ashes we didn't create. I was no longer the woman who'd been deceived. No longer a puppet in a web of twisted bloodlines. I was Sophia. And this time, I held the match. 1 week after the first hearing for Zach and Laura, Portland was wrapped in the quiet chill of early winter. I sat on the balcony of my new apartment near Back Cove, cradling a cup of hot tea, watching the still water, as if everything that had happened was just a dream. But reality had never been clearer. The Campbell estate had been frozen. Zach was facing 6 federal charges. Laura was in custody, awaiting further investigation for suspected involvement in William's death. And me? I was no longer Zach's ex-wife. No longer the daughter of a family bent under secrets. It was me, Sophia Blake. And I was starting over. Jenna showed up on a Monday morning, no warning, no drama, just a small box and a smile that was soft enough not to break. We sat across from each other in the kitchen, like the day I first uncovered the truth about Zach, only this time no one was wearing a mask. She opened the box. Inside was a silver sunflower pendant, the necklace I had given her on our college graduation. I found it in the old apartment, Jenna said. I hid it. When I started seeing Zach, as if not wearing it would make me feel less guilty. I held the necklace, smiling faintly. You know, the Sophia back then hated sunflowers, thought they were stupid, always facing one direction blind. Jenna nodded, eyes welling up. And the Jenna back then thought if she tried hard enough, maybe the flower could turn back to where it came from. Silence wrapped around us like a thin blanket. Finally, I said, I already forgave you. Not for what you said, but for what you were brave enough to do afterward. Jenna froze, then reached for my hand. Thank you. We sat there for a long time. Not to relive the past, but to prove it no longer had power over us. A few days later, Jenna introduced me to Grace Dawson, her mother, who was now overseeing the full restructuring of her company in the wake of the scandal. Grace, a tough, sharp woman with a gaze not easily shaken, shook my hand quietly, with a respect I never thought I'd receive from her. I read your statements. And the fund records. If it weren't for you and Jenna, we'd probably still be living in that illusion for another decade. I didn't do it for a career, Mrs. Grace. I know, she nodded. That's why I want you to join us, not to fix the past, but to help build something that doesn't need fixing. I looked at Jenna, then back at Grace. I need time to think. Not because I doubt you, but because I'm not sure I want to be part of any system of power ever again. She didn't object, she just smiled. I understand. When you're ready, my door is always open. That night, I wrote a short passage in my journal, the one I hadn't touched in nearly 2 years. I never thought I'd find peace again. But maybe peace isn't a place. It's the moment you realize you can keep living without needing permission from your past. I closed the journal, placed the sunflower necklace inside. The next morning, I started a nonprofit accounting course at the local community center. A small class, just 10 people, but I felt like I belonged. No one there knew I used to be Sophia Campbell. No one whispered my name with scandal. They just saw me as a woman learning how to use her skills to help communities become more transparent. Revenge used to be the biggest goal of my life, but now, I understand. Revenge isn't about destruction. Revenge is what gives you permission to walk away with nothing left to owe, not even to yourself. I burned the envelopes. I exposed the liars. I walked through the harshest truth any woman could imagine. And today, I just want to live. Not as someone who won, but as someone who chose to walk out of the fire instead of burn with it. Sophia's story isn't just about exposing a web of lies. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes what we need isn't revenge to win, but truth to be free. In a world of deceit and manipulation, awareness and courage are the strongest weapons. And when you walk away from the past without carrying hate, that's the real victory. Quiet, steady, and needing no applause. What do you think about Sophia's choice? Should she have forgiven or kept fighting? Leave your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional true life stories and untold family secrets.